In a simple house in Bath, a mother sews her own dress for her son's wedding, unaware of what she is about to discover. A forgotten cell phone reveals a cruel plan to remove her from her own home and institutionalize her in a nursing home. Betrayed by those she loves most, she must decide between the silence of resignation and the courage to stand up. But on the wedding day, before everyone, she proves that dignity is the last thing one can try to steal from a woman who has already lost everything, except the truth. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching us from. We continue. I promise this will be the best story you will ever hear in your life. The afternoon sun beat against the windows of the small adobe house in St. Sebastian's Quarter, Goldfield. Mrs. Teresa Oliver, 68, sat at her Singer sewing machine, delicately guiding the navy blue cotton fabric under the needle that moved up and down in a steady rhythm. Her hands, marked by decades of hard work, moved with precision and care. This would be the dress she would wear to Robert's wedding, her only son. The old machine, a gift from her mother when Teresa turned 16, was one of the few relics that had withstood the test of time. Like herself, a strong woman, born in the countryside and raised among coffee plantations, Teresa carried on her body the marks of a life of incessant labor, and in her deep brown eyes, a silent dignity that never bowed to hardship. After Anthony, her husband, passed away almost 10 years ago due to heart complications, she reorganized her life around her son. Robert had graduated. In civil engineering, thanks to her sacrifices, she did laundry and ironing for others, made homemade baked goods to sell at the Saturday market, and saved every penny. A car noise interrupted her thoughts. Through the window, she saw the white BMW parking in front of the iron gate. From the vehicle stepped Patricia, Robert's fiancée, a 27-year-old woman with perfectly straightened blonde hair, designer clothes, and a permanent air of superiority. Beside her, Robert, now a 35-year-old man, always seemed diminished by his fiancée's presence. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Oliver," Patricia greeted with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We came to see how the preparations are going." Teresa stood up, adjusting her apron over her simple cotton dress. "Come in. I just made fresh coffee." The small but impeccably clean living room was decorated with well-preserved antique furniture and family photographs. A carved wooden shrine housed the image of Our Lady of Apparition, surrounded by crepe paper flowers made by Teresa. Patricia looked around with ill-concealed disapproval. "Mum, we have some news," Robert said, sitting on the faded floral sofa. "The party will be at Royal Manor Event Hall. Patricia's father arranged it for us." The Royal Manor Event Hall was Goldfield's most prestigious venue for social events, located in an old colonial mansion that had belonged to coffee magnates. Teresa knew that an event there would cost a fortune. "But son, we had already booked the parish hall," Teresa argued softly. "We already paid the deposit." "Daddy has already sorted that out," Patricia interrupted, shaking her perfectly manicured nails. "He's friends with Father Joachim. Mr. Vaughan won't mind losing the deposit to have his daughter marry at the best place in town." Henry Vaughan was an influential businessman in the mining sector. His recent fortune, built in less than a decade, was a subject of speculation in the small historic town. For him, his only daughter's wedding was an opportunity to display his economic power and consolidate his position in the local high society. Teresa served coffee in porcelain cups, an inheritance from her grandmother. While Robert enthusiastically discussed the new party plans, she observed her son. Since he started dating Patricia 3 years ago, he had changed. Her simple, laughing Robert, who was content with a Sunday barbecue in the backyard, now talked about champagne brands and discussed decoration details with a concern she had never seen before. "And of course, Mrs. Oliver," Patricia continued, "we have to talk about your outfit for the big day." The way the young woman pronounced "your outfit" carried a subtle disdain that did not go unnoticed by Teresa. "I'm already taking care of it, my dear. I'm sewing a navy blue dress." Patricia and Robert exchanged glances. "Mum," he said, "Patricia was thinking of something more elegant. Her family will all be in formal wear." "I have a stylist friend," Patricia added. who can make something for you, something more appropriate for the occasion. Teresa felt her face flush, but she maintained her composure. I appreciate the kindness, but I prefer to wear what I'm making. That's how I dressed for my wedding to your father, Robert, and it will be the same for yours. An uncomfortable silence hung in the room. Well, Patricia said, standing up abruptly, we need to go. We have a tasting at the catering at 5. After the couple left, Teresa returned to her sewing machine. As the pedal rhythmically moved, she remembered her bank account. A lifetime's savings kept for emergencies now had a destination, to help with her son's wedding. Not that he or Patricia had asked, they never would. But Teresa knew that despite Robert's good job at a construction company, Patricia's grand plans were beyond their means. The next morning, Teresa carefully dressed to go to the bank. The manager, Mr. Clement, had known her since her youth. Mrs. Oliver, are you sure about this? It's practically everything you have, he warned, looking at the transfer form. Yes, Clement. That's how it is with a son. You do whatever it takes. Leaving the bank, Teresa walked to Saunders Jewellers, one of the oldest in the city. There, old Mr. Saunders greeted her with a hug. I've already set aside what you asked for, Teresa. It's the most beautiful gift a son could receive. She opened the small box. Inside, a gleaming golden Eterna watch, just like the one Anthony had worn all his life. Beside it, she placed the deed to the house now in Robert's name, her wedding gift. In the afternoon, when she handed the gifts to her son in a simple package, Robert was speechless. Mum, I can't accept this. It's too much. Yes, you can, my son. Your father would want you to have his watch and the house. Well, I'm securing your future. That night, after her son left, Teresa noticed something different in his gaze, a mixture of gratitude and guilt that she didn't fully understand. What Teresa didn't know was that, while she was giving everything out of love, other plans were being woven in the shadows. That same night, in a luxurious apartment in the center of Goldfield, Patricia spoke on the phone, her voice low but determined. After the wedding, we'll convince him to sell the house. That neighborhood is appreciating with tourism. With the money, we can take that trip to Europe we always dreamed of. Across town, in the small adobe house, Mrs. Teresa embroidered her name delicately on the blue dress, while listening to the rosary on the local radio, oblivious to the storm brewing on her life's horizon. The wedding preparations advanced at full speed over the next 2 weeks. Mrs. Teresa's house had become a meeting point for the ladies of St. Sebastian's Quarter, who gathered to help with the details that were still under her control. The handmade favors that would be distributed to guests, small sachets of lavender grown in her backyard wrapped in lace and ribbon. This daughter-in-law has no consideration at all, Teresa, commented Mrs. Zelda, her neighbor for over 30 years, as she tied the ribbons. She didn't even want to use the crochet towels you made for the trousseau. Everyone has their own taste, dear friend, Teresa replied serenely, though she felt a pang in her chest remembering the meticulously crafted towels now stored in the closet. The backyard was colorful with the presence of her friends. Under the laden jabuticaba tree, Mrs. Cindy, Mrs. Zelda, Mrs. Nancy, and Samantha, Zelda's youngest daughter, who had Down syndrome and adored Teresa, worked cheerfully. The Saturday afternoon was pleasant, with the aroma of fresh coffee and tapioca starch cookies just out of the oven. Gloria from the butcher shop told me 3 trucks of flowers came from London just for the decoration, Mrs. Cindy commented, adjusting her glasses on the tip of her nose. And the bride's dress came from Manchester. It cost more than a popular car, Mrs. Nancy added, shaking her head in disapproval. Teresa listened in silence. She didn't like to feed gossip, but she knew her friends were just worried about her. Everyone in the neighborhood had known Robert since he was little and witnessed the sacrifices she had made to raise him alone after Anthony's passing. The afternoon was interrupted by the sound of the doorbell. Samantha, always helpful, ran to answer. Aunt Teresa, it's the pretty lady with the big car, she announced excitedly. Patricia entered the backyard as if stepping into a strange environment. She was impeccably dressed in a white linen set and high heels that seemed inappropriate for the uneven stone path. She carried an elegant folder and seemed annoyed to find the group of ladies. "Good afternoon," she greeted dryly. "Robert couldn't come, he's dealing with catering details. We need to finalize some things, Mrs. Oliver." Teresa's friends exchanged glances, taking it as a cue to leave. "We were just leaving," Mrs. Zelda said, collecting her purse. "We'll finish the favors tomorrow, Teresa." After everyone had left, Patricia sat at the backyard table, opening her folder. "We need to review your guest list. Space is limited, even at the Royal Manor, and Daddy's list already takes up almost all the spots." Teresa felt a tightening in her chest. She had invited only 20 people, her closest friends, some dear neighbors, and the few relatives she still had. "There are only 20 names, Patricia. The problem is that—" Patricia hesitated, feigning embarrassment. "Some of your guests don't match the event's profile. You know, a wedding at the Royal Manor has a certain standard." Blood rushed to Teresa's face, but she took a deep breath before responding. "These people are my family, Patricia. They were with me in the most difficult moments. Samantha, for example, was the first to hug Robert when Anthony left us." "Precisely, Samantha is the problem," Patricia blurted out, abandoning the pretense. "She doesn't know how to behave at social events. She'll embarrass everyone." Teresa felt as if she had been slapped. Her hands, usually steady, trembled slightly. "Samantha is pure of heart. She has more manners than many people with diplomas hanging on the wall." The confrontation was interrupted by the sound of something falling near the wall, separating Teresa's backyard from the neighbor's house. Both looked in that direction, but saw nothing beyond the gently swaying jabuticaba tree leaves. Patricia sighed, impatient, and changed tactics. "Look, Mrs. Oliver, let's do this. You can bring up to 10 guests, but you need to ensure everyone is presentable. And as for Samantha, perhaps it's better if she only attends the church ceremony, not the party." Before Teresa could respond, Patricia's cell phone rang. It was a modern, gleaming device that contrasted with the simplicity of the surroundings. Patricia answered and moved a few steps away to talk, apparently with her father. Meanwhile, Teresa noticed movement on the wall. It was Peter, Mrs. Nancy's 9-year-old son, who used to play there. The boy made a gesture for silence and disappeared again. Patricia returned, visibly annoyed. "I need to go. There was a problem with the flower." "Arrangements." She quickly put the papers back in her folder. "We'll sort this out later, but think about what I said about the list." As soon as Patricia left, Teresa sat under the jabuticaba tree, feeling the weight of her future daughter-in-law's words. A few minutes later, a freckled, smiling face appeared over the wall. "Mrs. Oliver, can I come in?" "Of course, Peter. Jump over the wall. I'll open the gate for you to leave later." The boy jumped with the agility of a cat and ran to her holding something in his hand. The lady dropped her phone. "They're in the flower bed," he explained. "I was going to give it back, but she had already gotten into the car when I saw it." Teresa took the gleaming device, planning to keep it to return to Robert when he came to visit her. "Oh, and she said some nasty things about you on the phone," Peter continued with the sincerity of children. "I didn't want to listen, but she was talking loudly." "What things, my son?" Teresa asked, suddenly alert. "She said that after the wedding she was going to convince the fool— I think she meant your sons— to sell this house to put you in an old people's home there in Marigold." Teresa felt her blood run cold. "Are you sure, Peter? That's a very serious accusation." "Yes, Mrs. Oliver, I am. She said she was going to use the money to travel to Europe, and she said you were a nuisance." The word nuisance hit Teresa like a stone. She looked at the cell phone in her hands, feeling torn between disbelief and a suspicion that already existed somewhere in her mind, but which she had never dared to formulate clearly. "Mrs. Oliver, I know how to use these modern phones," Peter offered, noticing her hesitation. "My cousin has a similar one." With trembling hands, Teresa handed the device to the boy. Peter touched the screen a few times, and the phone unlocked. Patricia hadn't set a password. "Look, there are recordings here," he said, showing an audio folder. Teresa's heart raced as Peter pressed play on the most recent file. Patricia's clear voice filled the silence of the backyard. "Dad, everything is already underway. Robert has already signed the power of attorney to sell the house after the wedding. The old woman doesn't suspect a thing. We'll put her in that asylum in Marigold, the cheapest one we can find. With the money from the sale, we can take that trip to Europe and make a down payment on the new apartment. Teresa felt her legs weaken. She sat on the wooden bench, her hands clutching the rosary she always carried in her pocket. "There's more, Mrs. Oliver," Peter said, pressing another file. Robert's voice, hesitant and low, emerged this time. "I don't know, Patricia. It's the house where I grew up, where my father lived." "Don't be ridiculous, Robert," Patricia's voice cut in, impatient. "Your mother is old now, she needs care. In the asylum she'll have company, nurses, and we need that money to start our life. Or do you want to remain a mere site engineer for the rest of your life?" There was a pause before Robert's reply. "If it's for the best for everyone, I guess so." Teresa abruptly turned off the audio. She couldn't listen anymore. A solitary tear ran down her wrinkled face, but she quickly wiped it away. "Peter," she said in a controlled voice, "can you help me with something?" "Of course, Mrs. Oliver, anything. I need you to send these audios to my phone." The boy nodded, taking the simple phone Teresa pulled from her apron pocket. In a few minutes, he transferred the compromising audios. When Peter left, Teresa remained seated under the jabuticaba tree for a long time, her gaze fixed on the horizon where the sun began to set, painting Goldfield's colonial rooftops in gold. Her mind, however, was racing. Her son's betrayal, her daughter-in-law's cruelty, the plan to take her from her own home, all this swirled in a whirlwind. In her simplicity, Mrs. Teresa had always believed that love would be enough. Now, with the evidence of betrayal in hand, she realized she would need something more: courage to face those who were trying to erase her. With slow steps, she entered the house and opened the closet where she kept the navy blue dress she was sewing for the wedding. She looked at it for a long time, then at Patricia's phone, which she still held. An idea began to form in her mind. The wedding would be in 3 days, and she, Teresa Oliver, would be there. Not as the submissive old woman they expected, but as a woman determined to regain her dignity, no matter the cost. The next morning, Sunday, dawned with a fine drizzle typical of Goldfield. Teresa woke up early, as was her custom. She had slept little, the weight of the discovery tormenting her thoughts. After a sleepless night, a silent resolution had formed in her heart. She dressed carefully for the 7 o'clock Mass at St. Pilar's Parish Church. The Baroque temple, with its gold-leafed interior, was where Teresa had found peace since she was a girl. There she had been baptized, married, and there she had also baptized Robert. That day, however, not even the familiar comfort of the sacred place could calm the storm in her chest. At the end of the celebration, as the faithful dispersed, she remained seated on the polished wooden pew, the rosary beads between her fingers. Father Joachim, noticing her distress, approached after greeting the last parishioners. "Something troubles you, Teresa. It's not common to see you so pensive after Mass." The priest, already with grey hair, had known Teresa for decades. He had given Anthony his last rites and accompanied the family through their most difficult times. "Father," she replied, her voice low, "what should one do when we discover that those we love most plan to betray us?" The priest sat beside her, his face marked by concern. "Are you speaking of Robert?" Teresa nodded, but did not elaborate. Despite the pain, she could not fully expose her son's shame, even to her confessor. "Sometimes," the priest continued, "the greatest act of love is to show the truth, however painful it may be. The truth sets free, Teresa, not just those who hear it, but especially those who speak it." She held those words in her heart, along with the resolution that was already beginning to take shape. Back at her house, Teresa finally called the number Patricia had left written down, the phone the young woman would use until she returned her current one when she realized her loss. She needed to feign normalcy while preparing her plan. "Hello? Patricia? It's Mrs. Oliver. I called to let you know I found your phone here at my house. You must have dropped it yesterday." The response on the other end of the line was a mixture of relief and ill-concealed concern. "Thank goodness, I was desperately looking for it. I'll send Robert to pick it up right now." "No need to bother the boy," Teresa replied. "I'll bring it when I go for the dress fitting tomorrow." After hanging up, Teresa took out her own phone, a simple model her son had given her years ago. With Peter's help, she had already learned to access the audios. Now she needed to ensure that this evidence would not be lost. She called Mrs. Zelda, who arrived promptly. "Dear friend, I need your niece's help, the one who works with computers." Half an hour later, Renee, Zelda's niece and an IT teacher at the state school, was in Teresa's living room. Skillfully, she transferred the audios to her notebook and saved them in several places. In Teresa's email account, which she herself created, on a flash drive, and on Mrs. Zelda's own phone. "Are you sure you want to go through with this, Mrs. Oliver?" Renee asked, concerned. "It will be a scandal at the wedding." "Yes, my dear. It's not for revenge. It's for justice. And for Robert's sake, too. He needs to see who is truly by his side." On Monday, Teresa went to the bridal shop, where Patricia had insisted she try on an appropriate dress. The shop was in the upper part of the city, near the mansion where the party would be held. As she made her way there, carrying Patricia's phone in her purse, Teresa couldn't help but admire the historical beauty of her city. The colonial houses, the Baroque churches, the stone streets, all of it was a part of her, just as she was a part of that place. The idea of being uprooted from there to a distant old people's home made her heart ache. At the shop, she was greeted with an artificial smile by the owner, clearly instructed by Patricia. The dress chosen by her daughter-in-law was extravagant by Teresa's standards, a lilac ensemble with rhinestones on the neckline and a skirt too tight for her taste. "I will try it on out of politeness," Teresa said firmly, "but I already have my own dress." The saleswoman insisted, but Teresa was unyielding. After a brief clash of wills, she left the shop without the lilac dress, feeling a small triumph in that personal battle. Patricia appeared minutes later, abruptly parking her imported car. "What happened?" "The shop called saying you refused the dress." Teresa remained calm, extending the phone to her daughter-in-law. "Here's your phone, Patricia. And yes, I prefer to wear the dress I made myself. It's more suitable for my age and personality." Patricia took the phone with visible relief, quickly checking if there was anything compromising. Seeming satisfied, she put it in her purse. "Mrs. Oliver," she said, softening her tone, "understand that we only want the best for you. That blue dress is so simple. It doesn't match the elegance of the party." "What doesn't match the party is me, isn't it?" Teresa replied, looking directly into her daughter-in-law's eyes. "A simple old woman from the countryside, without the refinement for the world you want to build." Patricia seemed momentarily disconcerted by her frankness. "It's not that, it's just—" "Don't worry," Teresa interrupted. "I'll be there in my blue dress, and I promise not to embarrass you." There was something in the firmness of Teresa's tone that made Patricia back down. The next 2 days passed in a whirlwind of preparations. Robert briefly appeared at his mother's house the night before the wedding, visibly nervous and avoiding her gaze. "Son," Teresa said, holding his hands, "whatever your choice tomorrow, know that my love for you is unconditional." Robert seemed confused by those enigmatic words, but soon said goodbye, claiming to still have many details to sort out. When the big day finally arrived, Teresa woke before the sun. She finished the last adjustments to her navy blue dress, delicately embroidering her initials T.O. on the hem. In the inner pocket, hidden under the lining, she placed the documents that proved her financial contribution to the wedding: bank statements, transfer receipts, the deed to the house she had put in her son's name. Then she checked the audios on her phone once more, making sure they were intact. Around her on the bed, she spread other important documents: her marriage certificate with Anthony, Robert's birth certificate, old photographs, the original title deed to the house. Everything that proved her history, her roots, her dignity. At 4 in the afternoon, Mrs. Zelda arrived to help her get ready. The ceremony would be at 6 at St. Pilar's Parish Church, followed by the reception at Royal Manor Event Hall. "You look beautiful, dear friend," Zelda said, adjusting the simple but elegant bun in Teresa's white hair. "I've never seen such dignity in a gaze." Teresa looked at herself in the old mirror that had belonged to her mother. The navy blue dress fell perfectly over her aged but still upright body. On her feet, low-heeled shoes, comfortable but suitable for the occasion. Around her neck, the only luxury she allowed herself, the pearl necklace Anthony had given her when Robert was born. "I will face them with my head held high, Zelda, not for revenge, but so that the truth may come to light." A taxi was called to take her to the church. Teresa had refused the limousine that Patricia reluctantly had offered her mother-in-law, more for appearance than for consideration. Arriving at the historic temple, already packed with elegant guests, Teresa felt eyes on her. Expensive dresses, glistening jewelry, imported perfumes. She was clearly an out-of-place element in that environment, but her step was firm and her gaze serene. The church was magnificently decorated with white and gold floral arrangements. The altar shone under the light of hundreds of candles. Upon seeing his mother enter, Robert, already positioned at the altar, visibly started. Perhaps he expected her to give up after so many veiled humiliations, or perhaps deep in his conscience he feared precisely what was about to happen. Teresa was led to the front row where she was supposed to sit. However, a young receptionist, clearly instructed by someone, tried to direct her to a more distant seat. "The front row is for the groom's and bride's families," the young woman said, embarrassed. "I am the groom's mother," Teresa replied, with a dignity that made the young woman blush. "Sorry, madam. It's just that I was told—" "Well, please follow me." As she walked down the central aisle to her rightful place, Teresa felt the weight of the gazes. She recognized important figures of the city among the guests, politicians, businessmen, people who had never crossed the threshold of her simple house. On the groom's family side, there was only her and half a dozen distant relatives whom Robert had invited out of obligation. The music began to play, announcing the bride's entrance. Patricia appeared at the church door, stunning in a white dress imported from Italy, according to the comments circulating among the guests. Henry Vaughan, her father, proudly led her by the arm, displaying his daughter like a trophy. The ceremony was solemn and traditional. Father Joachim, who knew part of the story, cast a significant glance at Teresa during the homily about honor and respect for parents. When it came time for the vows, Robert avoided his mother's gaze. His voice trembled slightly as he promised eternal love to Patricia. At the end of the ceremony, as the newlyweds exited under a shower of rose petals, Teresa remained in her seat, taking a deep breath. The battle in the church was won. She had maintained her position and dignity. But the real confrontation would be at the party, where she planned to expose the truth she carried in the pocket of her blue dress. The waitress who had served coffee to guests in the sacristy approached when everyone else had already left. "Mrs. Oliver, my name is Julia. I'm the daughter of Mary Dolores, your childhood friend." Teresa looked surprised at the young woman with delicate features and lively eyes, so much like her dear friend who had passed away 5 years ago. "Mary Dolores? My Dory?" "Yes," the young woman smiled. "Mom used to talk about you a lot. She said you were strength in silence." A tear escaped Teresa's eyes. "I'm working as a waitress at the party," Julia continued. "I saw how they treated you here. If you need anything at the hall, you can count on me." Teresa squeezed the young woman's hand, feeling an immediate connection. "Thank you, my dear. I might indeed need help before the night is over." Leaving the church, Teresa got into the waiting taxi. As the vehicle climbed the steep streets towards Royal Manor Event Hall, she touched the documents hidden in her dress pocket, making sure everything was in place. The truth would be revealed that night, and not even she could predict the consequences. The Royal Manor Event Hall gleamed in the Goldfield night. The old colonial mansion, illuminated by hundreds of strategically placed lights, seemed to float amidst the mists that began to form as the temperature dropped. Luxury cars paraded through the entrance, unloading elegantly dressed guests. An orchestra played classical music in the entrance hall, where waiters circulated with glasses of French champagne. When Teresa stepped out of the taxi, she immediately felt the contrast between her simplicity and the ostentatious luxury around her. Even so, she walked, with firm steps to the entrance, where 2 receptionists checked invitations. "Good evening, I am Teresa Oliver, the groom's mother," she said, presenting the invitation printed on textured paper grudgingly sent by Patricia. The receptionists exchanged quick glances before consulting the table list. "Mrs. Oliver, Your table is number 27 in the side section of the main hall. Teresa knew what that meant. She had been placed far from the main table, probably alongside less important guests. Without showing any reaction, she took the table number and entered the dazzling hall. The atmosphere was breathtaking. The high ceiling was decorated, with floating structures covered in white orchids and golden lights. The tables, arranged in concentric circles around the dance floor, were impeccably set with white linen tablecloths, porcelain dinnerware, exquisite crystal, and exuberant floral arrangements. In the center, the main table, elevated above the others, was reserved for the bride and groom, the bride's parents, and important guests. Teresa located table 27, set apart from the center and partially hidden by a column. There she found some distant relatives of Anthony, visibly uncomfortable amidst such luxury, and two elderly couples she had never seen before, probably last-minute guests too. "Fill the table." "Teresa, so good to see you," greeted Gerald, Anthony's second cousin. "We were just commenting on how different Robert looks. I almost didn't recognize the boy." Teresa smiled sadly. "People change, Gerald. Sometimes more than we'd like." As guests arrived and the hall filled up, Teresa observed discreetly. The bride and groom had not yet entered. They were probably taking photographs in the mansion gardens. Henry Vaughan, Patricia's father, circulated among the distinguished guests, boasting about the success of his companies and the exorbitant details of the party. Julia, her deceased friend's daughter, passed by the table serving canapes. Seeing Teresa, she approached discreetly. "Mrs. Oliver, are you all right? I noticed they placed you quite far from the main table." "I'm fine, my dear. The truth doesn't depend on the table's position." The young woman smiled, understanding that something bigger was at stake. "If you need me, I'll be circulating around the hall, and in the kitchen I have access to the sound system." Teresa nodded, grateful for the unexpected ally. Finally, to a drum roll, the bride and groom were announced. Robert and Patricia entered hand in hand, smiling, receiving applause from the guests. Patricia had changed from her wedding dress to a lighter but equally luxurious model. Robert, in his impeccable tuxedo, seemed an unrecognizable version of the simple boy Teresa had raised. The couple briefly circulated through the hall, greeting the most important guests. When they approached table 27, Patricia tried to pull Robert in another direction, but he insisted on stopping. "Mum," he said, kissing Teresa's cheek with evident discomfort. "Is everything all right? Are you enjoying the party?" Before Teresa could answer, Patricia intervened. "Mrs. Oliver, I hope you're comfortable. I had you placed here because it's quieter, away from the hustle and bustle." The fake smile fooled no one at the table. Teresa looked directly into her daughter-in-law's eyes. "I am where I should be, Patricia, at least for now." Something in Teresa's serene yet firm tone made Patricia tremble slightly. Pulling Robert by the arm, she quickly moved away. Dinner was served with all the pomp one could expect: 5 elaborate courses, expensive wines, artistic desserts. At table 27, conversation flowed superficially, with Teresa participating just enough not to seem out of place. Her moment had not yet arrived. After dinner, when the dance floor opened, Henry Vaughan took the microphone for a toast. His speech extolled his daughter's qualities and superficially mentioned his son-in-law, "a promising young man who will have great opportunities in my company." There was not a word about Teresa or Robert's upbringing. When the bride's father finished, Patricia took the microphone, smiling. "We want to thank everyone for being here at this special moment, especially those who truly matter to our future." The look she cast in Teresa's direction left no doubt as to who was not included in that group. "Now," Patricia continued, "we invite everyone for a special toast with the Dom Perignon, champagne my father imported especially for this occasion." Waiters circulated, filling crystal glasses. Julia passed by Teresa's table, but instead of champagne, she served her water in a glass identical to the others. "I thought you might prefer it," the young woman whispered. Patricia, from the center of the hall, noticed the scene and frowned. With determined steps, she approached table 27. "Something wrong with the champagne, Mrs. Oliver. It's a very expensive vintage, you know. Perhaps it's a waste for someone who doesn't appreciate it. The provocation was clear. Silence fell over the table, and several people at nearby tables turned to watch. Teresa raised her glass of water, her eyes fixed on her daughter-in-law's. "I prefer to toast with water, Patricia," she replied in a calm voice, yet audible to everyone around. "Water is like the truth, transparent, essential to life, and when dammed up for too long, it always finds a way to surface." Patricia's face flushed with ill-contained anger. "Philosophies of simple folk," she sneered. "Come on, Robert. Your important guests are waiting." Robert cast a confused glance at his mother before being dragged away by his wife. Something in Teresa's gaze deeply disturbed him. It wasn't hurt or resignation, as he expected, but a determination he hadn't seen since the difficult times after his father's passing. The party continued with more music, dancing, and displays of wealth. At one point, the Master of Ceremonies announced that there would be a moment for tributes to the newlyweds. Several friends of the couple went up to the improvised stage for elaborate speeches and rehearsed anecdotes. Henry Vaughan once again took the opportunity to extol his daughter and his own business achievements. Then, to everyone's surprise, the Master of Ceremonies announced, "And now, we would like to call to the stage Mrs. Teresa Oliver, the groom's mother, for a few words." A murmur ran through the hall. Teresa slowly rose, smoothing her blue dress with her hands. Across the hall, Patricia seemed in a panic, whispering furiously with the Master of Ceremonies, who merely shrugged. Apparently, someone had included Teresa on the list of speakers without the bride's knowledge. Julia, passing quickly by Teresa, winked. "Be strong, Mrs. Oliver." With firm steps, Teresa crossed the hall towards the stage. The silence that accompanied her was almost palpable. Patricia, furious, tried to intercept her. "What do you think you're doing?" she hissed, grabbing Teresa's arm tightly. "We didn't agree to any of this." "Release my arm, Patricia," Teresa replied without altering her voice. "I have something to say to my son. You are not going to go up on that stage and embarrass us in front of all these important guests." The tension grew. Robert, noticing the confrontation, quickly approached. "What's happening?" "Your mother wants to make an unscheduled speech," Patricia explained, still holding Teresa's arm. "Explain to her that this is not part of the plans." Robert seemed torn, uncomfortable with the situation. "Mum, perhaps it's not the right time." "It is exactly the right time, son," Teresa replied, looking him in the eyes, "before it's too late." Something in the firmness of that gaze made Robert recoil. Patricia, however, completely lost control. With an abrupt movement, she pushed Teresa, making her stumble backward. "You're not going to ruin everything." The violent gesture shocked nearby guests. Teresa, off balance, leaned on a table. As she did so, the rosary she carried in the other pocket of her dress, an heirloom from her mother, detached and fell, scattering the beads across the polished marble floor. A deathly silence fell over the hall. Dozens of cell phones were raised, recording the scene. Henry Vaughan, realizing the public disaster that was unfolding, quickly approached. "What's going on here? Patricia, control yourself." Teresa, regaining her balance, showed no anger or shame. Instead, she slowly knelt and began to collect, one by one, the rosary beads scattered on the floor. That image, the elderly woman in a blue dress, kneeling in silent dignity, collecting her rosary after being pushed by her daughter-in-law in the middle of a wedding party, instantly etched itself into the memory of everyone present. Julia rushed to help her, kneeling beside her. Other guests moved, also approached to assist. Patricia, realizing her strategic error, tried to mend the situation. "Mrs. Oliver, I'm sorry. It was an accident. Let the staff collect it." Teresa finished collecting the last rosary bead, stood up with Julia's help, and looked directly at Patricia. "Some things, Patricia, we need to collect with our own hands. Dignity is one of them." With firm steps, she walked onto the stage a few meters away. The Master of Ceremonies, unsure how to proceed, handed her the microphone. A dense silence dominated the room. All eyes were fixed on Teresa's simple but imposing figure, standing on the stage, the rosary now securely in her hands. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice calm and clear. "I am Teresa Oliver, Robert's mother. Many here don't know me, and others perhaps would prefer I wasn't here, but I am, because a son, no matter what happens, will always be a son." Her eyes swept the hall, pausing briefly on Robert, who seemed paralyzed between embarrassment and a growing apprehension. "When Robert was born, I promised myself I would do everything for him. And I did. I worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs. I sewed for others, cleaned houses, sold homemade baked goods. When Anthony left us 10 years ago, I continued to fight alone, all so my son would have an education, opportunities, dignity." Teresa opened the small purse she carried and took out the documents she had kept in her dress pocket. "This wedding," she continued, "cost more than many here can imagine, not just emotionally, but financially too." Slowly unfolding the papers, she showed them to the audience. "Here are the bank statements and transfer receipts I made, all the money I saved for years, working from dawn till dusk, £70,000, my life savings given so this wedding could happen the way you desired." A murmur of astonishment ran through the hall. Henry Vaughan frowned, clearly surprised. Apparently, Patricia had said that the groom's father was the one contributing financially. "And here," Teresa continued, showing another document, "is the deed to my house, which I put in Robert's name as a wedding gift. The house where he was born and grew up, where his father lived and passed away, the only material possession I own." Robert visibly paled. Patricia, beside him, looked like a marble statue, her face frozen in an expression of growing horror. "I did all this out of love," Teresa continued, "without asking for anything in return, without demanding recognition or gratitude, because that's what mothers do." Her voice remained calm, without any trace of bitterness or accusation. It was just the truth being exposed in its purest and most painful form. "But a few days ago," she continued, taking the phone from her purse, "I discovered that my sacrifice would be rewarded in a way I never imagined." Julia, who had returned to the kitchen, reappeared with the sound technician. An imperceptible signal from Teresa, and she knew what to do. Approaching the soundboard, she connected the phone Teresa handed her to the hall's audio system. "I believe the words of the bride and groom themselves explain it better than I ever could." A click, and Patricia's clear voice filled the room. "Dad, everything is already underway. Robert has already signed the power of attorney to sell the house after the wedding. The old woman doesn't suspect a thing. We'll put her in that asylum in Marigold, the cheapest one we can find. With the money from the sale, we can take that trip to Europe and make a down payment on the new apartment." The shock was immediate and visible on all faces. Henry Vaughan, in particular, seemed stunned. Before anyone could react, Robert's hesitant voice emerged in the recording. "I don't know, Patricia. It's the house where I grew up, where my father lived." "Don't be ridiculous, Robert," Patricia's voice cut in. "Your mother is old now. She needs care. In the asylum, she'll have company, nurses, and we need that money to start our life. Or do you want to remain a mere site engineer for the rest of your life?" The pause that followed was excruciating. "If it's for the best for everyone, I guess so." The audio ended, leaving a deathly silence in the hall. All faces were turned towards the bride and groom. Patricia, white as paper, seemed unable to move. Robert, head bowed, was the very picture of shame. Henry Vaughan was the first to react. With heavy steps, he approached the stage. "Mrs. Oliver, may I verify these audios?" Teresa handed him the phone without hesitation. The businessman listened again, now privately, to the incriminating audios. His face grew redder and redder as the recording progressed. Returning the device to Teresa, he turned to his daughter and son-in-law. "Patricia, Robert, come here immediately." The couple approached slowly, like children caught red-handed. Henry, trembling with rage, demanded explanations. "Is this true? You plan to put Mrs. Oliver in a cheap asylum after taking the money from her house?" Their silence was answer enough. Robert couldn't lift his eyes from the floor. "Dad, it's not exactly like that," Patricia began, but was interrupted by her father's furious gesture. "Shut up. You have shamed me in front of all my friends and associates. You plan to use my money to finance such a betrayal. What kind of person have you become?" Turning to his son-in-law, he continued, "And you? What kind of man are you to allow your mother to be treated this way? To agree to sell the house where you grew up to satisfy my daughter's whims?" Robert finally looked up. Tears streamed down his face. I signed the sale papers," he admitted in a choked voice. "Patricia said it would be better for everyone, that Mum would be better cared for." Teresa, still standing on the stage, watched the scene with a mixture of pain and relief. The truth, finally exposed, was painful but necessary. Henry Vaughan took off his jacket and loosened his tie, as if suddenly the air in the hall had become too heavy. "This wedding is cancelled," he announced in a thundering voice. "Patricia, go get your things. We're going home now." In an unexpected gesture, he turned to Teresa and went up to the stage. "Mrs. Oliver," he said, his voice now contrite, "on behalf of my family, I apologize for this public humiliation. You have shown more dignity today than anyone in this hall, including myself." Taking the microphone, he addressed the stunned guests. "Ladies and gentlemen, this party is over. Please leave in an orderly fashion. Transportation will be provided for those who need it." The chaos that followed was indescribable. Confused guests left the hall in small groups, quietly commenting on the unprecedented scandal. Patricia, in tears of rage and humiliation, ripped off her ring and threw it onto a table before leaving, escorted by her father. Robert remained motionless in the center of the hall as if the world had collapsed on his shoulders, and, in a way it had. Teresa slowly descended from the stage, exhausted. The revelation of the truth had required more strength than she had imagined. Julia approached, offering support. "Are you all right? Can I call a taxi?" Teresa nodded, grateful. As they waited at the entrance of the almost empty hall, Robert finally approached. His eyes were red, his face devastated by shock and shame. "Mum," he began, his voice almost inaudible, "I don't know what to say." Teresa looked at her son, her heart broken but still full of love. "Don't say anything now, Robert. Go home. We'll talk tomorrow. Will you still take me in after what I've done?" Teresa gently touched her son's face as she used to do when he was a child. "A son will always be a son, Robert, but trust is like crystal. Once broken, it needs to be rebuilt, piece by piece." The taxi arrived, interrupting the moment. Julia helped Teresa into the vehicle. "Thank you for everything, my dear," Teresa said, squeezing the young woman's hand. "Your mother would be proud of you." As the taxi descended Goldfield's steep streets towards the simple house in St. Sebastian's Quarter, Teresa looked out, the window at the lights of the historic city. In her hands, the hastily mended rosary. In her heart, the certainty that night, something had broken irremediably, but also the hope that, from the ruins, something new and truer might one day flourish. The morning after the wedding disaster dawned grey in Goldfield. A fine, constant rain fell on the colonial rooftops, as if the city itself wept for the events of the previous night. Teresa woke up early, as she always did. Her bones ached a little more that morning, not just from age, but from the emotional weight she had carried. She prepared her simple breakfast, homemade bread with butter and a cup of strong coffee, and sat at the kitchen table, listening to the familiar morning program on the local radio. It was then that the first surprise of the day arrived. And the topic dominating conversations in Goldfield today is the scandal at the wedding of the year, the announcer excitedly proclaimed. What should have been the union of businessman Henry Vaughan's daughter with engineer Robert Oliver ended in a dramatic confrontation when Mrs. Teresa Oliver, the groom's mother, revealed a shocking plan by the couple. Teresa almost choked on her coffee. She had never imagined that her personal story would become news on the city radio. She turned up the volume, stunned. According to sources present at the event, Mrs. Oliver presented evidence that the couple planned to commit her to an old people's home after the wedding to sell her house. The video of the moment the bride pushed her mother-in-law, causing her to drop her rosary, is already circulating on social media and causing a stir. The doorbell rang, interrupting her listening. Opening the door, Teresa found Mrs. Zelda, Mrs. Cindy and other neighbors, all with expressions of concern and admiration. "Teresa, we were so worried," exclaimed Zelda, hugging her. "Everyone already knows what happened. Nancy's nephew works at the Royal Manor and told us everything." The ladies entered, bringing cakes and homemade baked goods, as was customary on important occasions in the neighborhood. In a few minutes, the small living room was full, with everyone wanting to hear the details directly from the source. "Was it really that awful, dear friend?" asked Mrs. Cindy. "They say you confronted your daughter-in-law in front of everyone." Teresa sighed. She didn't want to feed gossip, but she needed to clarify the facts. "It wasn't for revenge," she explained patiently. "It was for justice. I needed to show the truth before it was too late." As they talked, the doorbell rang again. This time it was an unknown young woman, formally dressed. "Mrs. Teresa Oliver, I'm Louisa Marsden, a reporter for the Tribune newspaper. I'd like to talk about yesterday's events." Teresa felt her face burn. "I'm not giving interviews, my dear. It's a family matter." "But your case is going viral on social media," the reporter insisted. "People are calling you the woman who didn't fall. The video has thousands of shares." Confused, Teresa asked for an explanation. The reporter showed her phone, where an edited video showed the moment of the push, followed by her calmly collecting the rosary beads and then revealing the truth on stage. Emotional music accompanied the images, and captions highlighted phrases like "dignity is priceless" and "a mother's silent strength." "My goodness," Teresa murmured, sitting heavily on the sofa. "I never thought this would happen." Throughout that day, Teresa's house became the center of attention in the neighborhood. More journalists appeared. Curious neighbors passed, in front of the house hoping to see some movement, and even strangers left flowers at the gate with notes of support. The landline phone rang incessantly until Teresa decided to unplug it. In the middle of the afternoon, an official city car stopped in front of the house. The mayor of Goldfield himself, Dr. Edward Campbell, stepped out of the vehicle, accompanied by an assistant. "Mrs. Oliver," he said, extending his hand politely. "I came personally to express my solidarity with what happened. You have become a symbol of resistance and dignity for our city." Stunned by so much unexpected attention, Teresa merely thanked him, receiving him for a few minutes. The mayor assured her that any attempt to irregularly sell the house would be prevented by municipal justice and offered free legal support through the public defender's office. Hardly had the mayor left when another visitor arrived, Henry Vaughan in person. The businessman, normally imposing, seemed smaller and older that day, with deep dark circles under his eyes and a face marked by fatigue. "Mrs. Oliver," he began, obviously uncomfortable, "I came personally to ask for forgiveness for my daughter's behavior." Teresa invited him in and offered him coffee, which he accepted gratefully. "I've always been strict in business," Henry continued, looking at the cup in his hands, "but I failed as a father. I raised Patricia by giving her everything money could buy after my wife passed away. I thought that would make her happy. Now I see that I only created a monster." There was a painful sincerity in his words that moved Teresa. "It's never too late to start over, Mr. Vaughan. Patricia can still learn." "I doubt it very much," he replied bitterly. "She left for the beach house in Brighton this morning, furious. With me for cancelling the wedding. She didn't even apologize for what she did." Before leaving, Henry handed Teresa an envelope. "Here is the amount you invested in the wedding, with interest. And also," he added, pulling another document from his pocket, "a term of annulment for the power of attorney your son signed for the sale of the house. My lawyer prepared it. You are legally protected now." After Henry left, Teresa sat for a long time on the porch, trying to process everything that was happening. The rain had stopped and a faint rainbow formed on the horizon of the historic city. Her moment of reflection was interrupted by the arrival of Julia, the young waitress, her deceased friend's daughter. "Mrs. Oliver, I came to see how you are. Everyone's talking about it." The young woman carried a package of homemade sweets and a newspaper in her hand. "You're on the cover of the local newspaper," she said, showing the front page where a photo of Teresa on stage holding the rosary bore the headline, "The Dignity That Does Not Bow." "This is all crazy, my dear," Teresa sighed. "I just wanted to protect my home and my dignity." "And you inspired many people in the process," Julia smiled. "Do you know how many messages I received today?" Co-workers, people on social media, all commenting on how brave you were. As they talked, Julia explained that the video had been edited by one of the sound technicians at the party, moved by the scene, and initially shared in local groups. From there, it quickly spread to larger pages, eventually reaching national news channels. Even a famous lawyer from Birmingham shared it, saying she wanted to help you. As if to confirm her words, a car parked in front of the house. From it stepped a young woman about 35 years old, dressed in a discreet but elegant suit. "Mrs. Teresa Oliver, I'm Marianne Walton, a lawyer. I came to offer you my services pro bono." Teresa invited her in. The lawyer explained that she had watched the video that morning and been deeply moved. "You have a solid case against your ex-future son-in-law and his fiancée," Marianne explained. "We have evidence of conspiracy, attempted fraud, psychological coercion, and even physical aggression during the party. I can help you ensure your rights are respected." Teresa hesitated. "I don't want to harm my son, Doctor." "I understand your maternal feeling," Marianne replied softly, "but we need to ensure that no one else tries to take advantage of you. And as for Patricia, well, actions have consequences." After a long conversation, Teresa accepted the legal representation, mainly to ensure the security of her home and prevent Robert from signing new documents under Patricia's influence. The day was already turning into night when Teresa finally managed to be alone. Exhausted physically and emotionally, she was preparing for bed when she heard hesitant knocks at the door. It was Robert. Her son was almost unrecognizable. The elegant man from the wedding now looked like a lost boy, with red eyes from crying, disheveled hair, and wrinkled clothes. He had 2 small suitcases beside him. "Mum," his voice was just a hoarse whisper. I have nowhere else to go." Teresa looked at her son for a long moment. Part of her wanted to close the door and let him feel some of the pain he had caused her, but the larger part, the mother she had always been, opened her arms. Robert entered and broke down in tears, kneeling before her as he did when he was a child after some serious mischief. "Forgive me, Mum. I don't know how I let things get to this point." Teresa held her son's face in her hands, wiping away his tears. "A mother's forgiveness is infinite, Robert, but trust, that needs to be rebuilt day by day." In the following days, Teresa's life underwent a surreal transformation. The case continued to reverberate in the media, with new revelations emerging daily. A national TV network sent a team to interview her. Elderly rights advocacy groups invited her to give lectures. Letters arrived daily, from unknown people touched by her story, from other victims of similar attempts at spoliation by family members, from admirers who saw in her an example of resistance. Gifts appeared at her door, flowers, crafts, sweets, even offers of money which she gently refused. Marianne, her lawyer, became a constant presence. Not only did she handle the legal aspects, definitively annulling the power of attorney signed by Robert and registering the house as an inalienable family asset, but she also helped Teresa deal with the sudden and unwanted fame. "You've received invitations to 3 television programs," Marianne informed her one afternoon, consulting her tablet, "and a publisher wants to publish your biography." Teresa shook her head, incredulous. "I never thought defending what is rightfully mine would cause such a stir." "It's because your story touched something very deep, Mrs. Oliver," the lawyer explained. "The issue of elder abandonment, family greed, financial abuse, these are issues that silently affect thousands of people. You gave a voice to them." At home, Robert slowly tried to rebuild his relationship with his mother. He had returned to work at the construction company, although he faced disapproving looks and whispered comments everywhere. At night, he helped with household chores, fixing a dripping faucet, a stuck window, occasionally preparing dinner. "Patricia called me," he commented hesitantly during dinner, 2 weeks after the incident. "She wants me to go to Brighton. She said we could start over away from here." Teresa looked at her son, trying to hide her concern. "And what did you say?" "That my place is here," he said, with a firmness that surprised Teresa. "Next to those who truly care about me." That same night, as Teresa was getting ready for bed, Robert gently knocked on her door. "Mum, can I come in?" He carried a shabby cardboard box which Teresa immediately recognized. It was where she kept the old family photographs. "I found this in the basement today, when I was organizing things," he explained, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Look at this one." The photo showed Anthony holding baby Robert, with Teresa beside him in front of their newly acquired house. The three smiled, happiness evident on their young faces. "Dad worked so hard for this house," Robert commented, his voice choked. "He worked overtime at the mining company even when he was already sick with lung disease, and I almost threw it all away for—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Teresa held his hand. "Your father would be proud to see you acknowledge your mistakes, son. That's what differentiates a real man from a boy." That session of old photographs served as therapy for both of them. Each image brought back memories, stories, values that had been temporarily forgotten in the frantic pursuit of social status that Patricia represented. Sometimes forgiveness begins with simply leafing through photographs yellowed by time. The next morning, Robert left early for work, but not before leaving breakfast ready for his mother, a habit he was resuming from his teenage years when he helped around the house. Teresa took advantage of the sunny morning to work in the garden, which had been neglected during the turbulent past few weeks. As she planted new lavender seedlings, her favorite flower, she noticed a car parking. It was Julia, accompanied by an older woman. "Mrs. Oliver," the young woman called out excitedly, "I brought a surprise. This is my Aunt Constance, my mother's sister. She just arrived from a nearby town and really wanted to meet you." Constance, a robust middle-aged woman with the same luminous smile as Mary Dolores, embraced Teresa as if they were old friends. "My sister talked so much about you in her letters," she explained. "When I saw that video online, I recognized you immediately." "It's Dory's Teresa," I said. The three women sat in the garden sharing stories about Mary Dolores, a friend Teresa had missed so much in recent years. Somehow, that unexpected meeting seemed to close a circle, bringing back an important part of her past. "You can't imagine how much good you've done," Constance commented. "Back in my town at the old people's home where I work as a nurse, the elderly residents watched the video about 20 times. One of them even confronted her son, who wanted to sell her house. She said, 'If Mrs. Teresa from Goldfield could do it, so can I.'" Teresa blushed at the compliment, still uncomfortable with the idea of being an example to strangers. But something inside her warmed at the thought that her story could empower others. As her visitors said goodbye, Julia hesitated at the door. "Mrs. Oliver, I was thinking, you told me you used to sell homemade, baked goods at the market. I love to cook too. Maybe we could do something together? I have a friend who owns a cafe in the historic center and said she could sell our things there." The proposal took Teresa by surprise, but the idea of returning to something productive, especially alongside her dear friend's daughter, was tempting. "I'll think about it carefully, my dear." That afternoon, as the sun began to set, painting Goldfield's colonial rooftops golden, Teresa sat on the porch of the house she had almost lost, with the mended rosary between her fingers, now an even more powerful symbol of resistance. She reflected on the twists and turns her life had taken in such a short time. Across the street, Peter was playing with other boys. Seeing her, he waved enthusiastically. Teresa waved back, grateful to the boy who, unknowingly, had changed the course of her history by finding that phone. The city that had always been her home now looked at her differently. She was no longer just Mrs. Teresa, Anthony's widow, Robert's mother. She was the woman who had faced injustice with her head held high, the woman who hadn't fallen when they tried to knock her down. Her phone rang, the new number Marianne had helped her get, known only to a few people. It was the lawyer with news. "Mrs. Oliver, I have 2 pieces of news. The first is that we obtained a court order prohibiting Patricia from approaching you or your residence. The second is that the BBC report will air tomorrow on Panorama. They did a beautiful job telling your story and using it to discuss the problem of financial abuse against the elderly in the Midlands." As she hung up, Teresa noticed Robert arriving from work. He carried a small bouquet of wildflowers, simple but chosen with care, as she herself had taught him in childhood. "They're for you, Mum," he said, handing her the bouquet with a shy smile, "to thank you for not giving up on me, even when I almost gave up on myself." Teresa hugged her son, the flowers between them. On the horizon, the gold-field sky transformed into a spectacle of colors, as if nature itself celebrated the renewal that was beginning to blossom in that simple adobe house, where a woman had found the courage to say no to injustice. And at that moment, Teresa knew that however painful the path had been, it had been worth it. For some things, like dignity, are priceless. 3 months had passed since that night at the Royal Manor Event Hall. Winter was showing its first signs of departure in Goldfield, with mornings still cold but afternoons increasingly sunny. In the small house in St. Sebastian's Quarter, much had changed, not only in its physical structure, but mainly in the lives that inhabited it. The report on Panorama had transformed Teresa into a kind of national celebrity. For a few weeks, journalists camped in front of her house, curious people knocked at her door at any hour, and the phone wouldn't stop ringing. They were difficult days for someone who had always valued simplicity and privacy. But now, with the initial media frenzy over, a new routine had established itself. Teresa had accepted Julia's proposal, and together they created Teresa's Baked Goods, a small business that supplied homemade cakes, cornmeal bread and cookies to 3 cafes in the historic centre. The recipe for the cornmeal and cheese bread, a family secret passed down through generations, had become a hit with tourists and residents alike. On a particularly pleasant Saturday morning, Teresa was in the kitchen preparing a special batch. Julia would arrive soon to help. The aroma of cinnamon and cloves filled the house, mingling with the smell of freshly brewed coffee. From the living room came the sound of the television, where Robert was watching the local news. "Mum," he called, "there's a report about that project you participated in." Teresa wiped her hands on her apron and went to the living room. On the screen, images showed the launch of the Mrs. Teresa program, an initiative by the Goldfield City Council, in partnership with the local bar association, to offer free legal assistance to vulnerable elderly people. Inspired by the story of Mrs. Teresa Oliver, who faced an attempted family spoliation with courage and dignity, the program has already assisted more than 50 elderly people in its 2 months of operation, the reporter narrated. Teresa sat beside her son, still uncomfortable with the idea of being a public inspiration, but she couldn't deny the warmth she felt in her chest knowing that her story was helping others. "You've become an icon, Mum," Robert commented with a proud smile, so different from the insecure man he had been months earlier. Since the incident, Robert had undergone a profound transformation. The public humiliation, followed by his mother's conditional forgiveness, had caused a kind of rebirth in him. He had returned to being the sensitive and hard-working young man he was before meeting Patricia. But now there was a new maturity in him, forged in the fire of shame and regret. "I'm no icon, son, just an old woman who refused to be treated like disposable furniture." The doorbell rang, interrupting the conversation. It was Julia, accompanied by Marianne, the lawyer who had become a family friend. "Good morning, Mrs. Oliver. I brought reinforcements today," the young woman said excitedly. "Marianne wants to learn how to make that corn cake she can't stop talking about." "And I brought news," Marianne added, after the greetings. "The case against Patricia is progressing well. She tried to contest, but the evidence is irrefutable." Robert, who had definitively ended his relationship with Patricia, despite her attempts to win back the site engineer after discovering her father had cut off her allowance, seemed uncomfortable whenever his ex-fiancée's name was mentioned. "Do you really think it's necessary to go through with this, Mum?" he asked, concerned. "We've already managed to annul all the documents I signed." "It's not for revenge, son," Teresa explained patiently. "It's to establish a legal precedent. Marianne explained to me that this can help other elderly people in the future." The lawyer nodded, agreeing. "Exactly, Mrs. Oliver. Your case is creating important jurisprudence in the financial protection of the elderly." While the women worked in the kitchen, Robert went out to fetch some construction materials. In recent months, he dedicated his weekends to small repairs and improvements around the house. not only as a way of compensating for what he had almost done, but as a genuine act of love. "How are things between you and your son?" Marianne asked, as she learned to knead the cake dough. Teresa smiled, sifting the flour with precise movements. "Trust is like a delicate plant, Marianne. It needs time, care, and patience to grow again. But we are on the right track." "You are incredible," Julia commented, separating the cake pans. "After everything that happened, you can still forgive. Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, my dears. It means choosing not to let resentment define who you are." The morning passed in a joyful atmosphere of shared work. The three women from different generations found in the kitchen a space for healing and connection. Between recipes and stories, bonds strengthened. After lunch, when Marianne had already left and Julia was helping organize the baked goods for delivery, Robert returned with an unexpected visitor, Henry Vaughan. "Mr. Vaughan wanted to speak with you, Mum," Robert explained, visibly uncomfortable. The businessman, always so imposing, seemed smaller and more humble than the last time Teresa had seen him. There was a dignified sadness in his gaze. "Mrs. Oliver, forgive the intrusion. I came personally to bring this," he said, extending an envelope. "It's the invitation to the inauguration of the Mrs. Teresa Support Home, a care centre for the elderly that I am funding." Teresa took the envelope, surprised. "It's not an asylum," Henry quickly clarified, noticing her hesitation. "It's a place where elderly people can spend the day, receive legal, medical, and psychological assistance, participate in cultural activities, a place where they will be treated with the dignity they deserve." "Why are you doing this, Mr. Vaughan?" Henry sighed deeply before replying. "To try to repair in some way the harm my daughter almost caused. And because your story made me see that I failed not only as a father, but as a member of a community that neglects its elderly." Teresa invited him to sit down. She offered coffee and fresh cornmeal bread, which he accepted gratefully. During the conversation that followed, Henry revealed that Patricia had gone abroad after the scandal, refusing to take any responsibility for her actions. "I created a monster, Mrs. Oliver. I gave her everything except values. Now I am paying the price." There was a vulnerable humanity in that powerful man that touched Teresa's heart. She, who knew the pain of failing as a mother, even if in a very different way, felt empathy for his suffering. "There's still time, Mr. Vaughan. For her, for you, for all of us." When Henry left, he left behind not only the invitation, but also a proposal. He wanted Teresa and Julia's baked goods to be supplied daily to the support home, with fair payment and a formal contract. "It would be an honor to work with you," he said sincerely, "and the elderly deserve the best." That afternoon brought yet another surprise. While Teresa and Julia were organizing the last deliveries of the day, Samantha, Mrs. Zelda's daughter with Down syndrome, appeared at the kitchen door, accompanied by her mother. "Aunt Teresa!" exclaimed the 32-year-old with her characteristic enthusiasm. "I brought a present." In her hands, Samantha carried an embroidered picture she had made herself. It was a colorful and lively representation of Teresa's house, with flowers in the garden and a figure in a blue dress smiling at the door. "It's you," Samantha explained proudly. "The bravest woman I know." Teresa hugged the young woman, deeply touched. It was a constant reminder that, had she given up fighting for her dignity, people like Samantha, whom Patricia considered unsuitable for her social circle, would have been erased from her life. "It's the most beautiful gift I've ever received, Samantha," Teresa said with tears in her eyes. Mrs. Zelda, observing the scene, commented, "You know, Teresa, you've changed more lives than you imagine." After that video, many people in the neighborhood found the courage to face situations they had been enduring in silence. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Peter, the boy who had discovered Patricia's phone. Now he was a constant presence in the house, helping with small chores in exchange for stories and baked goods. "Mrs. Oliver, look what came out in the school newspaper," he exclaimed, showing a small printed newspaper. "They did a report about you in the Citizenship Project." The article, written by elementary school students, simply told Teresa's story, presenting her as an example of peaceful resistance and dignity. The children had illustrated the text with colorful drawings showing an old woman with white hair collecting rosary beads. That night, after a day full of emotions and surprises, Teresa sat on the porch with Robert. The stars shone brightly over Goldfield, like diamonds scattered on the dark velvet of the sky. "I've been thinking a lot, Mum," Robert said, breaking the contemplative silence, "about new beginnings. They are always possible, son. As long as there is life, there is possibility for change. I received an invitation to work on a project to restore historic houses in vulnerable areas of the city," he continued. "The salary is lower than at the construction company, but it would be something with purpose, you know, to give back a little of what I received." Teresa smiled, proud of her son's transformation. The man who had almost betrayed her out of ambition now sought meaning beyond money. "Your father would be proud, Robert. He always said that a man's worth is in the good he builds, not in what he accumulates." The next morning, Teresa woke to the smell of coffee and fresh cheese bread. Robert had prepared breakfast. On the table next to the steaming cup, a small package. "What is this, son?" "Open it and see," he replied with an enigmatic smile. Inside the box, a new rosary made of dark wooden beads with a small silver crucifix. "I know you mended the old one," Robert explained, "but I thought you might like a new one too. The beads are jacaranda wood, like the ones grandmother gave you." Teresa held the rosary with reverence. It was a gift laden with symbolism, not just a religious object, but a silent plea for forgiveness, a promise of rebuilding. "It's beautiful, son. I'll use it every day." Later that day, as she walked to St. Pilar's Parish Church for Sunday Mass, Teresa reflected on the unexpected paths life had taken. The new rosary in her dress pocket, the old one, mended, carefully kept in a small box. The square in front of the church was full of families enjoying the sunny Sunday. Children ran, elderly people chatted on benches, couples strolled hand in hand. Life in its normal routine, beautiful in its simplicity. Several people greeted Teresa with special deference, a respectful nod, a warm smile, sometimes even a handshake or an unexpected hug from someone who identified themselves as an admirer of her story. Inside the centuries-old church with its gold-covered walls and Baroque saints silently observing the faithful, Teresa knelt to pray. She gave thanks for her preserved home, for her recovered son, for new friendships, for the unexpected opportunities that had risen from the ashes of betrayal. At the end of Mass, Father Joachim called her discreetly. "Teresa, I have a special request. The elderly care pastoral needs someone to coordinate the new support group for people who have suffered attempts at family spoliation. I immediately thought of you." The proposal took Teresa by surprise. She had never imagined herself as a leader of anything, much less a support group. "I don't know if I'm capable, Father. I'm just a simple woman who defended what was hers. And that's exactly why you're perfect for the role, Teresa. Your experience, your dignity, your ability to forgive without allowing new injustices, all of that is exactly what those people need to see." After reflecting for a few moments, Teresa accepted. It was a way to transform her pain into something constructive, to give meaning to what she had lived through. On her way out of the church, she found Julia waiting for her with exciting news. "Mrs. Oliver, the Colonial Cafe wants to increase our supply, and Mrs. Clara said we can use her industrial kitchen on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons at no additional cost." The small baked goods business grew organically, bringing not only supplementary income, but also a new purpose for Teresa. It was comforting to know that her skills, developed over a lifetime of work, were still valued and needed. On her way back home, Teresa passed by Rosary Square, where a small craft fair was held on Sundays. Among the colourful stalls, one caught her attention. A young artisan sold handmade rosaries and prayer beads. The young woman, recognizing her, insisted on giving her a delicate rosary made of blue beads as a gift. "The colour of your dress that night," she explained. "What you did gave me the courage to leave an abusive relationship. Now I'm starting over with my craft." Teresa accepted the gift, moved, another confirmation that her story had transcended the personal sphere. What began as a struggle for survival and dignity had transformed into a beacon for other navigators in turbulent seas. At home, she found Robert in the backyard, planting lavender seedlings next to the existing rose bushes. I thought you might like to expand the garden, Mum, for when your support group starts. A beautiful and fragrant place for meetings. Teresa watched her son working the soil with his hands, as his father used to do. There was a new serenity in him now, a peace that came from rediscovered purpose. His hands, once accustomed only to signing papers and shaking hands in negotiations, now learned the value of creating, cultivating, building. That night, after a simple dinner shared with Robert, Julia and Marianne, who were now a regular part of her inner circle, Teresa sat on the porch to admire the full moon that bathed goldfields, colonial rooftops in liquid silver. In her hands the mended rosary, a symbol of a faith that, like herself, had been tested, almost broken, but emerged stronger. The beads, once scattered across the marble floor of the Royal Manor Event Hall, were now reunited, bound by a stronger thread, like her own life. The house she had almost lost was now more alive than ever. The son who had almost betrayed her now rediscovered her with adult eyes. The community that had almost forgotten her now recognized her as an example, and she herself, who had almost been silenced, now found a voice stronger and clearer than she had ever had. Looking at the stars that dotted the Midlands sky, Teresa understood that sometimes someone has to try to knock us down for us to discover that we can fly. The push that was supposed to silence her was the same one that made her raise her voice, and that voice now echoed far beyond the mountains of the Midlands. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope Mrs. Teresa's story has touched your hearts. To continue this journey of emotions together, we have prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. Find it here by clicking on your left. If you enjoyed this narrative, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give the video a like. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life and the strength of the human spirit. Don't miss our next content. We await you in the comments to know what touched you most in the journey of Mrs. Teresa Oliver, the woman who transformed her pain into hope for so many others.